So if you're moist, if you're weak, if you're lame, if you got daddy issues, if you hate your father, if you hate black men, if you hate black women, if you don't care what the black family looks like, if you're more concerned about shoes than survival, if you're more concerned about sexual access than life itself, you are a harmless Negro. And they're not worried about you. When you start talking like us, this is dangerous. Absolutely. Because they're talking about empowering themselves. Well, if you get power, you'd have the ability to harm us. Well, it doesn't matter in their minds whether we even have the desire. All they're concerned about is, yeah, but you would have the ability. And we got to safeguard ourselves. So they brought in these other groups, as you know, where they come from. They have white supremacist cultures and tendencies already. Remember, Spanish is an European culture, not an African one. So when you hear somebody speaking Spanish, that's part of a European culture, not an African one. And even though many of us here speak English, the problem that they have with that is we're not assimilating. We're trying to go back to our African roots, whereas these other people who come from European cultures, they're already at their destination. Miss Cortez, she's already there. So she's not going to move. She just wants to get a bigger piece of the white supremacist pie. I don't want a bigger slice of the white supremacist pie. I don't. I want to take over the damn oven. And the cabinet with the flour and the sugar and the refrigerator with the eggs. I want that. You keep your pie. I want to have the means to make my own.
Professor Black Truth, because I've heard you speak about that fake black-brown coalition. When did that black-brown coalition thing get started, Professor Black Truth?
Well, tragically, it didn't start in the United States. I say tragically because if it had started in the United States, perhaps we might have had something of a chance to head it off. But the Black-Brown Alliance basically got its origins with these coolies. We're starting in almost exclusively in Hispaniola. You basically had all of these Europeans who had got some black folks and telling them, your problem, the reason we're discriminating against you isn't because of your color. It happens to be because of your class. Well, it happens to be because of social factors, and that mixed people's heads up. And next thing you know, you got some of these people who started coming to the United States. Many of them were responsible. Arthur Schomburg, one of our grandest master teachers, even Dr. Ben, his mother was Puerto Rican herself. So it's not. I'm not spitting on our Puerto Rican brothers and sisters. But what I'm saying is they had a different conception of that kind of thing. And unfortunately, black people in the United States, we had our own little issues with color. So what happened was when we couldn't get your hands on a white woman, well, let's take the next best thing. And that problem has just spiraled and spiraled ever since. Confusion from outside the United States and desperation for some sort of pat on the head inside the United States, which has culminated in let's have a coalition. Well, as Dr. Clark said, you can't have an alliance unless you got the means to punish those who break the alliance. And black folks got to have some political maturity. There ain't a damn thing that's going on in somebody's bed that's supposed to mean more than your power. It's as simple as that. That is a different way for black folks to think, but it's the right way to think. It's the way that a person who wants to survive thinks. It's a person who's concerned about things that have no meaning to us right now, like legacy, things like some sort of future for your children, integrity, looking at the person beside you and saying, I'm fine with this man because he comes from common roots as me, as opposed to, well, maybe the grass is greener over there with those other people. There is no future for black people who've decided that they're going to invest in a black-brown alliance. Ocasio-Cortez, she's a freaking millennial. And listen to how she talks. She talks just like that Representative Gutierrez from New York or whatever. She talks just like all of these other Hispanics in the past who every time you bring up anything regarding black people, it's all about, well, don't forget about Cesar Chavez. Yeah. Or don't forget about this, that, and the other person. They always got to find a way to shoehorn themselves into any discussion involving us. We need to wake up to the con, folks. Your Black-Brown Alliance was a mirage. It was a delusion. It was a fever dream. And it's time for you to wake up. Well, the other thing is when they get together in their groups, they don't interject us. They don't say, hey, what about Tariq Nasheed when they get together in Latino groups? They don't say that. But in the modern era, this obsession with the Black-Brown coalition is born of weakness. Black people, in a desperate attempt to force politics to achieve our goals without an economy. Now, the only way you win in politics, ostensibly, is with numbers. So, since you're only 13% of the population, the numbers don't work for you. But if you can somehow convince other groups to vote with you, then you can make politics work. And we've been trying to make politics work without the underlying economics. That's what's led us in the modern era to this obsession with the Black-Brown coalition, the desperate idea that we can forge a political dynasty without first building the economic foundation.
Absolutely.
And we're trying to do it. We're trying to sex our way to a coalition. We're trying to badger our way to a coalition. We're trying to culture vulture our way to a coalition, and it doesn't work that way.
We're here with Professor Black Truth and the Black Authority, for those who are just tuning in, talking about issues that affect foundational Black Americans. Brothers, one thing, as we talk about the issues that affect Native Black Americans, I notice there's a lot of talk about a rift between Black Americans and Black people from the diaspora, Black people from the Caribbean. What do you think about the relationship and the criticism on both sides that some of the Black immigrants have in us? There was a video that's circulating of a Black woman on a bus, on a train, having an argument with an African woman, and a lot of African immigrants are circulating this around, talking about how they've been mistreated by Black Americans, and we're pointing the finger at them. What do you think about the, I would say, Pan-Africanism that we've been trying to cultivate?
White supremacy has successfully sown seeds of dysfunction. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. It's how the Belgians were able to drive division between the Hutus and the Tutsi. But the problem is we've also got some homegrown problems of our own. All the tribalism, where you got the different tribes, different ethnic groups trying to magnify themselves against one another. Right. So this kind of dysfunction is obviously going to happen when you got brothers from Africa around brothers from the United States. What's going to happen is you're going to be having the same old tribalism, or some of that store-bought white supremacist dysfunction that they sowed among us. We have to be honest about some of that stuff, because even if the white supremacists hadn't been there, we had some of these issues that we came by honestly. Yeah. So what's the solution going to be? First solution has to be Black folks have to learn how to get along with each other at the local level. We need to withdraw from each other simply for the fact that right now we're too toxic to each other. It wouldn't work, because we haven't, as Malcolm put it, we haven't learned how to be acceptable to one another. So until we get that straight, all the talk about trying to make an African-American alliance, we can try to put it together as tripping over our own shoelaces. I guess we kind of have to, but we need to understand that the rancor that's going on between Africans from Africa and Africans here in the United States, that is, in fact, part white supremacy, but part of the fact that we didn't deal with our issues. That's how we laid ourselves open for the Europeans to come in and just take stuff. Because when it came time for my brother and I to unite against a stranger, we didn't do it. And we need to be honest about that. We didn't do it. That's what you had with the freaking Moors, who apparently thought that religion with the Arabs was more important than the bonds of color, kin, and genes. Absolutely. So that dysfunction is the reason why it's going on. And I don't know how it is that you're going to have somebody who comes from Nigeria, who with a clear conscience can spit on the brothers here in the United States who got him in the first place. I suppose part of it is probably jealousy. There's a little bit of that going on. We need to be honest about that too. I mean, let's be honest. If you ask, what is the face of Black people to the world? It's African Americans. You ask who the most prominent Black people are that people think of, they're going to be talking about Jay-Z. They're going to be talking about Michael Jackson. They're going to be talking about Michael Jordan. But who they're not going to be talking about is whoever the big man on campus is in Chad. They're not going to be talking about him. About the only African of note that most people can talk about is Nelson Mandela, and he's dead. So unfortunately, I think you got a little bit of jealousy that comes into play. Again, this is a matter of Black folks who have perfected the art of being far more civil towards strangers, even oppressors, than we are towards one another. And we got to be honest about that. I'm very sorry if there's some Black folks who have gotten an inferiority complex because they feel like, well, you African Americans, you guys, really aren't that great to begin with. It's like somebody who comes from a poor country who then immigrates to a second world country. And instead of them basically feeling like, let me become part of this group or let me make my peace with the fact that home wasn't so great, instead they try to find ways to spit on their new place to make themselves feel better about the fact that home wasn't so good.
Mm, mm,
Now, that dovetails with what Neely Fuller has always said, that Black people should not get together in a group without an agenda.
yeah.
And first and foremost, we are going to have to accept that we are not going to be able to forge connections as Africans in America or Africans in Africa unless somebody takes the lead on it in the interest of Black people. Power does not respect weakness. Power respects power. And guess what? Africans in Africa are not going to respect Africans in America unless we exercise power. They're not going to accept it because they're watching white people and Russians and Asians come on the African soil and exert power. That gives them something to gauge it by. But they don't see us doing the same thing. So tonight, I'm glad we did talk about that because that comes to the crux of what we all want to talk about here tonight. What is the Black agenda?
Yes.
What is it? Because Roland and crew don't know. Joy Reid can't even spell it. The rest of these people are not interested in it. What is the Black agenda? And since these other people don't know, let me go ahead and spell it out for you so we can be clear.